Good morning, afternoon, or evening, folks, and welcome to Cast of All Trades, the show where we talk about developing skills, exploring ideas, and following curiosity. My name is Orion. In this episode, I talk about my 5 recommended books for generalists. I hope you consider picking up these books for yourselves and giving them a read. And with that, let's get into the episode. In this list of 5 book recommendations, I've included 3 books about generalism and skills development, and 2 books about purpose. For the skills development books, I chose these books because I believe each provide a solid framework for the aspiring generalist who is interested in growing and developing their skill set. Those 3 books being How to Get Better at Almost Everything by Pat Flynn, Ultra Learning by Scott Young, and Range by David Epstein. As for my 2 books on purpose, I chose these books because I believe it's important for journalists to not just develop skills, but to have a meaning and purpose behind it. So the 2 books I chose were How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton M. Christensen, James Allworth, and Karen Dillon, and EKY Guy by Hector Gracia and Francis Miralles. So let's dig into each of these books one by one and the main lessons that I have learned from each of them. Starting with perhaps one of my favorite books of all time, How to Be Better at Almost Everything by Pat Flynn. It's quite a short book, only about 9 chapters, including the introduction and conclusion. To read out each chapter, just because it is such a short book. Chapter 1, When Great is the Enemy of Good. Chapter 2, Gaining Your Freedom for Excellence and the Right to Choose, wrongly if necessary. 3, Becoming an Expert Generalist, 5 Key Principles. Chapter 4, How to Practice Better and Improve Faster. Chapter 5, Where to Begin, Meta Skills. Chapter 6, Skills You May Be Interested in But May Not Need. Chapter 7, Skills You May Need But May Not Be Interested in. My key takeaways from this book were as follows. It's possible to be both financially stable, even successful, as a journalist in our modern day. I read this book first way back before I even started thinking of myself as a journalist or a jack of all trades. This is right at the cusp of me discovering this whole lifestyle of it. And when I came across this book, I thought to myself, wow, this is awesome. Another principle that I took away from this book is that it's often easier than you think to develop new skills if you just take the right mindset to it. And finally, the power of meta skills in living a generalist lifestyle. It's amazing what you can do with just a few key skills that can help you build up so many other skills around you. So, this book was How to Be Better at Almost Anything, at Almost Everything by Pat Flynn. An amazing book, one that I would recommend for any generalist or aspiring generalist out there. It's simultaneously a motivational book and also an educational book. So keep that in mind, and I look forward to hearing your response on it. The second book I want to touch on is Ultra Learning by Scott Young. This is the go-to book for anyone looking to learn skills faster. Ultra Learning is chock full of case study after case study of people learning new skills and how they did it. Everything from homemade computer science degrees using free Harvard materials in a year, to polyglots learning new languages, to an aspiring game designer creating his first video game from start to finish with no prior knowledge. Ultra Learning, similar to How to Get Better at Almost Everything, is to me both a motivational book showing the potential of how to quickly learn even the most complex of skills in a relatively short amount of time, even so that busy people can start learning these skills, and an actionable book that shows you various methods for how to learn said skills. So while Ultra Learning may not be a book about generalists, jack of all trades, polymaths, etc., the content you'll find in this book will provide you a wonderful framework that will help you in developing skills and various skill sets on your path of becoming a generalist, a jack of all trades, a polymath, or whatever term you want to use for it. It's amazing what you can do with just a couple skills and a couple key principles and the frameworks that Scott provides in this book. So, one that I would highly recommend, Ultra Learning by Scott Young. The third book, and the last book on generalism and becoming a jack of all trades, is the book Range by David Epstein. And this is the book I'm definitely the least familiar with of all of these. While I have read it, it's one that's highly recommended by many other generalists. It's one that I haven't looked as deeply into. That said, here are some main things that you'll find in the book Range. Many examples and case studies debunking the myth that you have to be a specialist to become the number one in a thing, and how generalists' varied background is often beneficial in the long run, including such examples as Tiger Woods, Tom Brady, and many others. Where ultra learning is often about learning skills faster, range pushes for a slower learning strategy and the benefits that has with it. And it almost is never too late to start learning a new skill, both if you want to do something as a hobby or even doing something professionally. David in his book also talks about embracing the process of failure and experimentation, since failure and experimentation is learning. Learning from failures is part of the whole learning process. And this is just a grand overview of the book range, so for far more in-depth education, you're just going to have to read it for yourself. And I know I'll be brushing up on it again sometime soon for myself. So those are my 3 main recommendations for the aspiring generalists out there who want to read some books to help them along their path of becoming a generalist, a jack of all trades, or a polymath, or whatever you want to call it. Now on to my philosophy and psychological books, starting with How Will You Measure Your Life? As the title of the book implies, this book is all about figuring out how you're going to decide what to do with your life and how you're going to make it meaningful to you. This book is broken into 3 main parts, starting with your career, then family and relationships, and finally freedom. Career, because most people will spend a greater portion of their life at work, so finding a career that's meaningful to you or allows you to do what is meaningful to you is central to living a quote-unquote good life. Next is family and relationships, because at the end of your life, what people seem to reflect on the most and care about the most is the quality of their relationships. In fact, according to many studies, having high quality relationships is crucial for living a longer, healthier life. Where having bad or even mediocre relationships has about the same health outcomes as someone who smokes a pack of cigarettes a day for over 30 years. It's amazing what family and relationships can do in our lives, both in making us live longer, but also live happier, healthier, and overall just better lives in general. And finally, freedom, a short section at the end of the book, essentially saying that you want to be doing things that will increase your freedom, not lessen them, i.e., don't go to jail, don't be a criminal, don't do stupid stuff like that. Well, simple in principle, the book, How Will You Measure Your Life, contains valuable insights that will certainly help guide you to living a better, happier, and healthier life. The final book I want to touch on is EKY Guy, and this is going to take a little bit more explanation than the rest. What is EKY Guy, first and foremost? It's very roughly translated as a reason for being, and how does this differ from your quote-unquote life's purpose? There's a few key differences here. One, a life's purpose is a common Western idea where you were quote-unquote born to do X, where you were put on this earth to do this one thing. How Ikigai really differs from this is that it changes throughout your life. As we grow and as we change, so will our beliefs and so our desires and ultimately our Ikigai, or if you want to think of it in the Western terms, your life purpose. We aren't limited to just having one Ikigai, where often in the Western view, we have one life's purpose. Like, this is what you were born to do and you're going to gosh darn do it. Or you have to figure out what it is that you're going to do. You're going to do everything it takes to figure out what that one thing is. That's not the case with the concept of Ikigai. With Ikigai, you could have 1, you could have 2, you could have 3, you could have 20 plus over your lifetime. And it's very much all about growth and change and figuring out, what am I doing today? What is my reason for being for now, for today, for the next little while? So how do you find your Ikigai? What is your current Ikigai? And in this book, there are 4 main questions that come up to help you figure out what is your Ikigai. First one is, what brings you joy? The idea behind it being, well, this is your reason for being. You should probably enjoy it. Second is, what are you good at or willing to practice to get good at? Because if you're doing something and you're not very good at it, 1, you're probably not going to enjoy it, and 2, if you're not good at it, then what are you really doing with it? Or if you're not willing to get good at it, then you could be spending your time doing something else that you are good at or are willing to get good at. Third is, what can you get paid for? Or perhaps down the line as you get older and you don't have to worry about getting paid for everything you do, what provides value? Because we want to do something that, like, if we're getting paid for a thing, we ideally want it to be somewhat meaningful to us. It doesn't have to be everything to us. Our job does not have to be our lives. It doesn't have to be our everything to us. We have more to us than just our work. As we go back to How Will You Measure Your Life, Career is only one part of that. There's also family relationships and freedom and hobbies and so much more. But if you can get paid for doing this thing, it certainly helps. Or if you can provide value to your community through this thing, it certainly helps. And fourth, last but certainly not least, is what does the world need? Or the way that I prefer to think about it is, what does your community need? What do your people need? Can you find something that brings you joy, that you're good at or willing to get good at, that you can get paid for or provides value, and that is a need in your community or in your world? By answering these questions and finding the overlap between them, you'll be able to find your Ikigai. There's so much more to Ikigai than just this whole idea of, oh, what is my purpose? What brings me joy? What is all this? What is this? There's so much more to that, and it's similar to many other Japanese concepts, and it's one of many Japanese concepts that's central to living a good life. And what makes Ikigai stand apart from the Western view of life purpose is that Ikigai is inherently changing as you change. Many Japanese philosophies contain elements of impermanence, imperfection, or change that seem to be lacking in Western philosophy. And it's in these elements that it really drives home for me just how valuable the concept of Ikigai can be for our lives. These are just a few of my book recommendations, and there are many more that I could have recommended. So, what would you recommend? Share your book recommendations in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode, then please share it with a friend you think would like it, or share it on social media. It would absolutely mean the world to me, and it helps the podcast grow so much. With all that said, thanks for listening. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later. Ciao.